Welcome to TaleLearCode. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
I swear, I think I talked to Christos about doing this talk like 8 months ago. It feels like it's been so long ago. This is actually should be a really good talk. I've actually seen him do similar talks, but this is also what he does, right? He actually is I can't remember his actual title, but basically is a developer evangelist, or not evangelist, advocate for Microsoft on the Microsoft Identity team. Working with developers, helping them understand how to use all the different tools with identity. So, I have really been looking forward to this presentation. I know I will be taking some notes because I need to understand identity better, even myself. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christos.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Christos, and I work for the identity team. I'm a PM for the identity team, although I work for the developer advocacy teams, which makes things very, very weird. And oh my God, it's the other way around. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Am I fine? Because I can see it the other way around on
At least
Zoom.
On my screen, you are coming out fine.
Okay. Interesting. I can see myself. It's fine. It's okay. As long as you guys can see me, okay, it's okay. Right. And I love talking to developers about writing more secure software. That's the whole point of me being here, helping you write better, more secure code without having to worry about the in-depth, the details of how all these things work together. Because ideally, you want to just avoid doing all that. So if you haven't seen me before, we do have a stream that we do twice weekly, every Tuesday. And oh man, I need to update the slide. Every Tuesday and Friday now. We moved for Mondays at 8 a.m. Pacific time, or 11 a.m. Eastern, or 4 p.m. UK time. And we capture end-to-end scenarios. We explain to developers how to build secure software with the Microsoft Identity. And it doesn't matter whether you're running on Azure AD, whether you're running, on Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or any other provider. In fact, we love working with developers wherever they are and using the languages and the tools that they like. So if you want to catch up more, if you have questions about us, you can always reach out to me and the rest of the team to ask questions and for us to help you get unblocked. It was 2007. That's my first story with Identity. And I was actually commissioned as a consultant to write a CRM for a university. It was for the University of Strathclyde in the UK. And the whole point was they wanted to manage projects that were getting from the European Union, and they wanted a CRM platform that would be extensible to build on top of that. Now, as a naive young consultant, rather than getting something off the shelf and providing them with some customization, I decided to implement everything from scratch using ASP.NET, because that's what the young naive developers do. They like to reinvent the wheel without adding any value. And one of the things I had to obviously implement was identity management. I had to enable users to sign in. I had to enable admins to sign in to the system. And I thought I could do it well. Back then also, there was no Azure AD, and I think there were other identity providers, but again, in my naivety, I thought I can do it better. I know what I'm doing. It's just a username and password. I know that I need to hash and store the details somewhere securely. So there goes my journey into writing my own username and password database. Eventually, I realized that I had to add more features like password reset. I also realized that my database could be brute forced. I also realized that the website could be brute force attacked. And there were so many elements there that as I started working on the project, it ended up being a 3-month identity project where I was learning how to protect my users and the data and building it. And luckily, I didn't make the news like some of these friends of ours made the news over the past few years. It's horrifying to think that the cybersecurity losses due to cybersecurity or cyber attacks in 2020 were $1 trillion globally. It was just 400 billion back in 2015. So in the last 5 years, it exploded. And that's because these attacks are not part of isolated hackers that are trying to brute force their way into your website, or they're trying to find some limitations. We're talking about whole countries funding these attacks. Or we're talking about organized crime using that platform to actually acquire either resources or data and sell them in the black market to make money. So today, as you build software as a software developer, you have to think about not just how to scale and implement an efficient solution, but also how to make the application secure by default from the start. I've spoken to a lot of companies, and I work with a lot of people from the industry out there where security and performance have always been an afterthought. Like, let's push something out of the door and then we can make it more secure, and then we can add more performance, then we can think about scaling, right? Let's hit that problem first and then we get there. However, you don't have to be big today. You don't have to be Adobe. You don't have to be creative. You don't have to be Dropbox. Anything that you put out there in the public domain will be attacked. How did I know that? Or how do I know that? I have a personal blog. It's been running for 12 years. And at some point, I decided to move from WordPress to Ghost. And Ghost allows you to also have an email service built into the framework, that every time somebody subscribes, they get automatically an email. It also uses that service to reset passwords if you have other guest writers and what have you. So one of these days, I was working on my website, and I thought, why not use GitHub to automatically publish to Azure Web Apps? And I don't have to worry about moving DLL files or moving artifacts into Azure myself via FTP. I can let Azure Web Apps do what it does best, pulling from a repository. And there's me pushing my code one late Thursday afternoon to GitHub. And then it deployed beautifully to Azure Web Apps, and I was delighted for the experience. It was great. But then the next morning I woke up and I got an email from SendGrid saying, you hit your maximum quota of 20,000 emails. I was like, oh my God, I went viral overnight. I don't know what happened, but somebody found my blog post and started propagating. It wasn't that. One of the fine prints at the bottom of the email was, please make sure whether you have put your credentials in a GitHub repo. And lo and behold, I was one of these people that actually pushed their SendGrid credentials onto GitHub. Somebody found it. In fact, there are bots today that are scanning GitHub, all the public repos for private keys, public keys, secrets, passwords, any keyword that they can find. They will scan it, harvest it, and push it out. And as developers, we do make mistakes. I'll learn from my mistakes, and hopefully you'll learn from my mistakes so you don't have to repeat them. But we are responsible for writing secure software, and not only securing our resources, but also our data, our users' data. Because users will always try to find the easy way in doing things. Now, how many of you here have ever used the password? I'll be the one to say that. Now, you might say, well, you know what? I only used Adobe once and I haven't used it since, and it's absolutely fine. But that email and password could have been used somewhere else for you to sign in. Maybe Facebook, maybe Twitter, maybe some other social media account. And what happens there is that that information becomes available to criminal elements or hackers. They will either sell them or do something else, but they try these accounts on other platforms. So they will take the password and the email they found in Adobe, and they will try to sign in on your Netflix account, on your Facebook. And then from that point on, they can have other attacks or other ways to elicit money. I don't know if you heard about the story, but a lot of people had their account information hijacked. It was used to sign into Facebook, and then they put a post out there saying that they were stranded somewhere and they needed money, and they were asking their friends and family to send them money into a specific account. So, criminal elements were using other people's accounts to gain access to money. And sometimes it might not be about money or anything else. It might be your resources. So hacking is not just about getting access to your users' data, but it could be hacking your resources to run crypto mining. It could be hacking your resources to launch DDoS attacks and using your resources as bots. So we want you to be protected against these things. And right now, these numbers are slightly out of date, but if you have ever followed or heard about Troy Hunt and the Have I Been Pwned website, you'll see that there are 10.5 billion accounts right now. This number seems down here, it says 19. Checked recently, I need to update my slides as well. It's awful of me. But sitting at 10.5 billion unique email accounts that have been harvested from attacks. And the pwned websites are sitting at about 550. So a lot of websites, a lot of big websites with millions of accounts have been compromised. And every week we learn about something new. If you are in the public space, you are going to be a target eventually. I'm not going to spend too much time over here because this is marketing fluff, but the one thing I like to focus on is the 30 billion authentications that take place on Azure AD daily. These are 30 billion accounts that we sign in every single day, and we get telemetry and information to build tools to protect you. So you as a developer don't have to worry about scalability. You might say, Chris, I'm not Coca-Cola. I'm not Walmart. I'm just building a website for my company and there will be 10 users using it, which is absolutely fine. The important bit here is that you as a developer don't have to think about scalability. Thinking back into my CRM, right? Let's imagine that overnight it got 20,000 users. Now I need to think about how the database is going to grow. How am I going to store the data? How am I going to replicate the data? I need to make sure that if something happens, I can restore from a backup and have a reliable service. You, as a developer, shouldn't have to think about that, at least when it comes to your identities in your system, because you can let somebody else take the onus and drive that. So if you are wondering if the service is reliable and can scale, I think that number just goes to show that. Hopefully by now I have convinced you that you shouldn't be writing your own user databases and you shouldn't be managing your own identities. So if your manager comes to you tomorrow and says, Michael, I want you to go and build a new website for our company, and I want you to be able to sign in our users securely, maybe even single sign-on, I don't know, do whatever you have to do. Obviously, your first question will be, do we have anything I can use today in the company? Are we using Azure AD? Do we have any other system that we can use? It might not be Azure AD, could be some other provider. So ideally you're using Azure AD, but if you're not, at least you're using an identity provider that does it for you. If you are lucky to have Azure AD, and most companies, funnily enough, have, if you're using Office 365, if you are using Word and Excel in your company and you have an Office 365 account, you actually have an Azure AD behind the scenes that can be used for development reasons. And if you have Azure, then it does come with a default tenant. So you also have another Azure AD there to use. Next question will be, how easy is it for me to get off the ground? Today, I will show you that it takes a couple of lines of code to implement authentication in your .NET applications. If you are writing with Java or Node or Python, it might be a few more lines of code, but in comparison to the 3 months I spent writing my own authentication, it's a long way to getting you off the ground quickly. So yeah, you can start very, very quickly. Does it support or integrate with the platforms and the tools I use? In fact, we encourage any platform, any language, and any tool whatsoever. Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, Rider, IntelliJ, Java, .NET, Python, Ruby, any language that you want, and any platform you can run on AWS. In fact, we were working with a customer recently that wanted to have multi-cloud deployments, so their applications were running both on Azure and AWS, and we're able to accommodate that. Therefore, we don't care. In fact, we invite everyone to do that. And finally, does it support advanced features? My 2007 solution was simple. It was a simple one. You could sign in users, you could reset passwords, and you could send some emails, but it did not have two-factor authentication. It did not support conditional access. It did not support advanced features like FIDO keys or whatever. I don't think FIDO keys existed back in 2007, but if they were available, I wouldn't have the slightest clue how to implement them. As a developer today, you get all this for free. All you have to do is just add the appropriate libraries into your code, write a couple of lines of code, and then as long as your IT team has switched the right knobs, you get conditional access, you get multi-factor authentication, you get FIDO support, passwordless, single sign-on out of the box. You don't have to write this. You don't have to write extra code for that. That's what I'm saying, and that's a big, big, big improvement. So with Azure AD, if you decide to go down the Azure AD route or path, we provide you with reduced sign-in friction. We give you the libraries that you need to implement. We give you the appropriate tools to get you off the ground, and we give you the appropriate documentation to make it happen. And if you get stuck, you have us to always ask. We have a fantastic support team as well, both for developers and IT pros. So you're not alone. You get access to organizational data. We will cover Graph in a little bit, but I just want to make sure that if you're not aware about Graph, then anything that is running on your organization is actually accessible via the Graph API, which is an API that sits on top of everything. Dynamics, CRM, your Azure AD data, your Dropbox, your SharePoint, everything that is deployed within the org, and it allows you to easily query that, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Complying with IT, that's very, very important. We talked about conditional access. What if your company wanted to shut down access to everyone after 6 p.m.? We don't want you to work late. Let's shut it down. That means that with one conditional access, the IT team will implement that, and then your apps automatically comply to it. You don't have to do anything for it. So again, as a developer, you don't have to worry about how do I do these things. I don't want people to access my app from Australia because, I don't know, some laws do not allow Australians to access my data. That means that I can use conditional access again to do that, and I don't have to worry as a developer how to implement that in code. Can you imagine the code that you have to write for that? And finally, safeguarding access to not only your data and your resources, but your users' data as well. Like I don't ever have to touch somebody else's password. It's all stored for me in Azure AD or B2C. I don't have to worry about how they're stored. If I'm using the right encryption and hashing algorithms, I mean, today people are still confusing encrypting and hashing data. And then if you're like, oh, I'm going to hash data, then they're still confused about which hashing algorithms are right. Most of them will not do the appropriate research. So they might end up with a SHA-1 or a SHA-2 or very fast algorithms like MD5 that can be cracked in a few seconds. So, all these things I have to take into consideration are all taken care of for you. How do I get started? What do I need to do to implement all these things? It's simple. There are two main components. One is the Azure AD side, the actual tenant, the Azure AD component. In there, we just need to go and register an application. That application shows intent that we are going to use Azure AD to authenticate our users. I don't know if you ever had to work with other identity providers like Facebook or Google or whatever, but they have an exact same requirement. You have to go and register an app that shows your intent. So once you do that, whether you do it via the portal or the Graph API, it can be totally automated. Once you do that, then the next step is to write a little bit of code. If you are very new to the Microsoft Identity Platform, if you're starting today and you have the requirement to add authentication, then we give you the appropriate libraries. We have the MSA library, which is the current library, the one that we fully support for now and in the future. You drag that package to your solution, and we have packages for all the appropriate languages or the major ones anyway. And if we don't have one that you want to use, then let us know. So Go, Python, .NET, Java, JavaScript, what have you. They're all supported. And then we provide you with endpoints. Now you might say, why do I care about endpoints? Because you might already have an application that has been running for a while that already contains authentication code. Maybe you're using Passport for Node. At that point, you don't want to strip everything out and write it from scratch. All you have to do is just point your code to our OpenID Connect endpoints and everything works. Any questions so far or anything else? No, I'm moving on. I'm monitoring the chats, by the way. So if you want to ask any questions, don't feel that you have to wait until the end. Then I'm happy to answer them now. In certain cases, your applications, let's say you have a single page application that needs to pull data from somewhere, and usually in single page apps, we don't pull that information directly in the code. We use some API somewhere to do it for us. In that instance, you might need to register an API in your Azure AD to say my web app is going to call my API to get some data. And they need to be able to verify each other, right? I need to know that my request came from my single page application and it's hitting my API, and I'm passing some kind of information token to authenticate between the two. And then my API knows what to do. So these are the two things that you have to know about. One, app registration, or maybe two inside Azure AD, and a little bit of code in your application. We'll do a demo right after this one. Supported identities, that's very important. Who and how can I authenticate in my application? If you are building, there are two choices at the very top level. If you are building applications for your organization, that is mycontoso.com, my Microsoft.com, or my company.com users, then you use Azure AD. This is organizational users. If you are building an external website, like you're building an e-commerce website where you want people to come and buy from you, let's say Walmart, they want to set up some authentication for people to come in and buy stuff, or you're building a forum or a mobile app that people need to come and sign in and build a profile, then for that, you use Azure Active Directory business to consumer, B2C, business to customer, business to consumer, whatever you want it to sound like. At this point, you might say, well, that's all Microsoft. What else can I do with that? So B2C offers you at the very basic level a username and a password. But we do know that a lot of users love their social media logins. So many of them may choose to sign in with Facebook or Google for convenience. In fact, today I was buying a standing desk, and they said at the checkout, do you want to use your Google account or do you want to create a brand new account with us? At that point, I was like, I don't really want to link my Gmail account to this one, so I'll sign in as a new user. But many people like the convenience. So if you want to offer that convenience to your users, then B2C allows you to bring any OpenID Connect provider. It doesn't have to be the ones that we have in the list. We have a list of like 15 predefined ones, but we support anything. Like the other day, somebody built tweets signing for their social media account or platform, where they have their tweets users coming into their social media platform to chat after hours, like Discord, but a new Discord. I don't know. But they were building it on the stream, and they used tweets as the social media login provider inside B2C for their platform. It just goes to show that it's very versatile. And we follow standards. I don't want to overwhelm people with standards like OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. I think as long as you know that our libraries are built on top of standards, it gives peace of mind that if I want to use another library that is not Microsoft provided, then I'm well entitled to do so because I'm following standards. And from us, it's important that we don't reinvent the wheel, or we don't have people locked into proprietary technology, because we want to support these standards. So everything that we have implemented, all the authentication and authorization flows are part of that standard. Many people don't really care about it. So let me see, I could do a JavaScript demo, but I'm going to actually do a .NET demo today, and then we can switch. If you want a JavaScript demo, I can do one as well. So let's change directory. Let's make this big so everybody can see it. And I'll change directory into my projects. And here we're going to make a new directory called, what should we call today? Demo. And in here, I'm going to create a brand new web application with .NET Core. I think I'm on .NET 5. Let's see. Did you know, by the way, that we announced .NET 6 yesterday? Preview 1 just came out. So if you are keen in trying new, exciting, not finished bits, then go and grab Preview 1 and let us know how you find it. But I think I'm on .NET, that's the version, on 5.0.1.3. So we're good. We're not playing with the latest and greatest, mainly because I want to make sure that things are working. So .NET new, we'll do web app, that's authentication, I can't remember. Authentication, I think it's auth and single org. Okay, so this is going to spin up a brand new web app using .NET Razor pages. And I'm going to open the code in a bit so everybody can see it. Let's make it big. And let's look at the project. What do we have here? We have a couple of NuGet packages, mainly the Microsoft.identity.web, which is the important one. That's the brand new library. Hi, yes. That's the brand new library that we introduced in September that wraps around the whole authentication component around MSAL. And then we have the web.ui that provides the user interactivity, like the sign-in page and the sign-out page and what happens. That's all built into the library. Why do I say that? I'll show you in a second. So with those two packages, I have everything I need to go into my startup and wire up my identity component. So let's line 32 and 33. Let's make this smaller. They have the add authentication, and then down below they have add Microsoft web app. So here we say, I want to have a web application that authenticates against Azure AD. And then down here we have the default authorization. In fact, your application will run without it if you don't have that. And then down here we have the Microsoft Identity.ui. So 1, 2, I mean, I could make that one line if I wanted to. 1, 2 lines of code, then 3 lines of code. And then down here, we need to have the use authentication. That's the 4th line of code. Anything else? Yes, we have the www root. Sorry, not here. We have the pages. And in the pages, we have the shared. And in here, we have a login partial. And this is where we go when we want to sign in. So we have a sign in and a sign out button. And lastly, we have some config settings that we have to provide. So let's sign into our portal and configure that so we can have an application running for us today. Let's use this one. Why not? So in Azure, we'll do the first bit that we talked about, right? The Azure AD App Registration. This will allow us to authenticate and grab the information we need for our Azure AD. It should be at the top. There you go. Make it big. So here I'm going to go into my app registrations, and then I'm going to add a new one. We're going to call it demo, just so we can match. I'm going to use just my organizational users. I only want people from Microsoft to sign in here. For the sign out, for the their direct URI, sorry, this is where the tokens will be returned. I'm going to go with HTTPS localhost port 5001 because that's where we're going to be running, and then sign in that's OIDC. Where did you find this URL, Chris? Right, let's go into back to our code. See, sign in OIDC. This is where we expect the tokens to be from Azure AD. You could change that, but then again, you're messing with stuff that you shouldn't be messing. So let's go with the defaults. So we have that for our Azure AD authentication. And then we'll register this. Then we need to go into our authentication. It knows that's a web app already because I provided a direct URI. If I hadn't done that, we have to come and add the platform here. And you can see, you can choose from a web, you can choose from a single page app, iOS, desktop solutions with Objective-C, blah, then Android, if you're doing for Android, and then finally desktop, WPF, UWP, and Xamarin applications if you have them. So here I have that one already configured. I just need to check these 2 boxes here and save. Don't forget to save. And now we need to go and grab that information. So client ID, let's go back into our code and place that. That's the tenant ID. That's the client ID here.
I understand how to see that because I can't see anything.
You can't see anything? Can you guys see stuff?
Yeah, I think it's just a little blurry on the screen.
Oh, is it? Oh, God. Really? Okay. Let me do this. I
It's
don't know
probably
what's
your
going to
Zoom.
happen. Display settings. It's always fun when you do it live, right? So I'm going to change to 1920 by
Live
1080.
demos are always the best.
Yes.
Nothing could go wrong.
Nothing. I agree. So that is much. So let's see. Is that? I don't know if that's any better, to be honest. Is that any better, or is that still worse in terms of blurriness?
It's still pretty blurry
It's
for
still
me.
pretty blurry. Yeah. You know what? I think it's my app speed. It's not particularly good. So I'm just waiting for a few seconds to see what the display looks like. That's still quite blurry, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's not as bad as it was before. Yeah. Is it totally unillegible? Like it looks okay-ish on the.
I think it's better, I think.
Okay.
I think it's readable, yeah.
Sorry, it was really bad before.
I think it looks good on Zoom. It doesn't look good on the stream. God, I hate that. I need to work on
I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you on that.
No, it's fine. I can take interruptions. It's absolutely fine. So tenant ID. I think that's the last thing that we need to add there. So as you can see, we have the instance, which is the Microsoft tenant one. So we don't change anything. Domain is Microsoft on Microsoft.com. Tenant ID and client ID. So now we can run it. Terminal, new terminal. So it's .NET run. And it should build and run the website for us. Just thinking about it. Okay, start it. So as you can see, straight off the bat, it asks for me to sign in because that's the default way we set it up. I know that's blurry, so I'll try to make it unblurry. Signing in here. Because the first time I'm signing in, it also prompts me for accepting the permissions. And in here, we're going to say, yes, I accept the permissions for the application to look at my profile and maintain access offline. And lo and behold, at the very top, you can see that I'm signing with my Microsoft account. So going back into what we discussed, in a few lines of code, I was able to do that. In fact, I can do it in a fewer lines of code if I wanted to really show off. So here, let me close this one. Up here, we can actually remove that and say .add Microsoft Web App Authentication and just pass the configuration there. How about that? One line of code does everything you need. So you can see I was able to, in fact, anyone at Microsoft right now will be able to sign into this application without having to worry about that. And because we have single sign-on, the next time I come in, I won't even have to worry about signing in because it will know who I am, all for free. Let's go back to the slides. It's readable in VS Code. It's in the Azure portal where it's really very, yeah, thanks, Robert. I will look into that. Could be my OBS messing things up. Now, we covered this one. Come as you are. I've already covered this. We really like for people to not feel locked into the platform. So you can bring your own developer tools, your services, and your platform, whether you're running in containers, on some Kubernetes cluster, on-prem, or anywhere else. We want to see you using the right tools for authenticating and managing your identities. And here, this is a quite provocative web slide because apart from the Azure identity at the top or the Microsoft identity at the top, everything else is not Microsoft. But we are collaborating with the IntelliJ team, with the PyCharm team, with JetBrains Rider to add authentication. In fact, if you are using Rider today, we have good news. You already have Azure AD built into the Azure Toolkit, which means that you can go and add authentication from inside the ID. And we're also bringing this to other tools as well. And again, we don't really care whether you're running on AWS or Google Cloud or DigitalOcean, and any language and any platform is supported. And finally, reinforcing the fact that it doesn't have to be on the cloud. It can be on-prem, it can be a serverless solution, it can be on Kubernetes, anything is supported. Obviously, if you are using the Microsoft stack, then there are some added benefits. We just concluded 2.5 hours of managed identity with .NET and Azure. If you haven't heard about managed identity, it's an identity that it is managed by Azure, but it's provided to you for free on Azure resources. And those resources can use that identity to communicate with other resources. A very good example is having a website running on Azure Web Apps, speaking to a SQL database or storage or Key Vault or what have you, without having to set any secrets. Think about that. Never, ever again having to worry about passwords, connection strings, or keys to your services. And what's even better, you also get that flexibility and capability on your local developer environment. So the Azure SDKs that we built allow you to not only do that on Azure, but as you're building locally on your machine, you can use your own account to authenticate against those services without using a secret or a key, which means that we can do secure DevOps end to end. It also allows you to authenticate to all these services using either your account or a service principal, a managed account that is managed by or backed by Azure AD. And you can communicate. So your Visual Studio can actually access a SQL Server without having to authenticate, or you explicitly adding a secret or a password. You can call Graph and they get all the data behind the scenes. Your Power Apps can also pull information from your APIs and other resources via API management. In fact, we're working on that scenario now to make it even better. We want you to be secure. We want your enterprises to be secure. We want to eliminate the case of you sharing secrets or certificates or anything else that could become an attack vector for people that want to maliciously access data or resources. I'm going to skip this one because that's boring. Single sign-on, it's very important. I just said that the application that we just built will provide single sign-on to anyone at Microsoft because it is built with Azure AD and the Microsoft tenant. For you as a developer, you don't have to worry about how am I going to do that? Like, do I need to worry about where my tokens are stored or how are they stored, how are they acquired and what's happening? And it also provides mobile SSO, which means that your applications, like your mobile apps, and even apps that call into web use, if you are using the built-in browsers, and if your devices have been onboarded with Intune, you automatically get single sign-on. Like if I had to reset my phone maybe about a month ago, I did not have to sign in anywhere. In fact, I have Authenticator there as well, the Microsoft Authenticator app. So I was only prompted for a couple of things to just verify my credentials. And then it just went on. Teams, Outlook, I don't have to worry ever about how to access on-premises resources and applications. And that is all about usability, because there's this big debate about if I make my application super secure, then it becomes less usable to the user. Think about it. I was just doing my taxes when it was like Monday, and I went there and my accountant just typed into her password and tried to get into the system. And yeah, man, you can interact with me, Scott, whatever you want. So they were trying to sign into their user, and then they got prompted for a password reset. And you should see the sweat on her face. It's like, oh man, I need to remember my password. I need to create a new one. And I don't know what to do. And I can't reuse my passwords, thank God. Because Azure AD was actually prompting her to reset. And man, it was just awful because she did not have anywhere to write her password. She did not have a password manager, which I hate that. Companies should provide their employees with password managers because I don't want them to be writing down or trying to create easy passwords to remember. So obviously there were requirements there for the password, and you've probably been the victim of that. Your password needs to be at least 8 to 16 characters long. It needs to have an uppercase, a lowercase, a few characters, and then good luck trying to create one and remembering it. So from my perspective, having single sign-on is very important, and then providing a good user experience it's also very important. I think at Microsoft, we did away with password resets at frequent intervals. I think we did once a year, if that. But Azure AD offers some fantastic tools. Like if somebody tries to sign in Germany with my account, I get automatically alerted. IT team gets automatically alerted. Everybody is on the ball. This is not something you get if you implement your own solutions. That's why I don't want you to do that. So we talked about MSAL. I think this is a great point to say that we also have an older version of our library called ADAL that is out there littered around. If you have solutions that actually use ADAL today, please reach out to me or my team or us and start thinking about the migration, because it will be sunsetted in June 2022. So at the end of June 2022, your libraries will no longer be supported by Microsoft, and it means that you could be liable to security attacks or any zero-day attacks that could be found against those libraries. So move or start your migration to MSAL today. We talked a little bit about B2C. This is all about creating customized experiences for your users. And this is where, if you are building an app that is customer facing, you want the experience for the user to be consistent. So, you have a nice green screen with a nice background, and suddenly they get redirected to some other website that they have to sign in and they come back. For some, that might look like a jerky experience. Leaving your app to go somewhere else and come back. We can avoid that by providing a super customized sign-in experience for the user that you can build using B2C. So since B2C is a customer-facing solution, we want to make sure that that your users find that experience delightful. You build nice experiences for your users while they remain secure, and you don't have to worry about the scalability. B2C also is free for the first 50,000 monthly active users. That means that if you have a solution that has up to 50,000 users signing in, day out, no matter how many sign-ins they do, it's still free. And then after the 50,000, there's certain tiers of pricing that come into play. But I think once you hit 50,000 users, that's a good problem to have, to start paying for their sign-in, considering that it is all automatically scalable. Scott, I will provide my contact details. You can reach out to me after the stream. Either me, my team, or our support team will get back to you to help you get your SSO working, guaranteed. Tandy is asking, I would assume the access token returns to the app has expiration time. Does MSAL auto-refresh it? So what happens if you need to get an access token, you automatically get a refresh token with that. And you're right, there is an expiration time in your access token. Currently, access tokens have a default of 60 minutes, which means that if somebody gets an access token today, like right now, and then they get fired from their company and you wipe out their account, they will still have access to those resources for 60 minutes. That's the worst case scenario, right? But we are also working on continuous access evaluation, which means that over the next few months, you'll be seeing capabilities coming to MSAL that will automatically evaluate the token every time they try to access your solutions or your resources. And that means that if they shouldn't have access to certain resources because you remove their access, they should not be able to get it. Now, refresh tokens come with your access token. Once your token expires, the refresh token will be responsible to go and grab a new access token. It will also grab a new refresh token. So it perpetually refreshes itself. For example, in my Outlook, I haven't signed in forever. What happens every 14 days, it will go and look into, let's say I'm off, right? I'm actually off this week, although I'm using my Outlook. I should be using my Outlook. I am bad at doing holidays. Anyway, let's say I was off for 3 weeks. I haven't touched my thing. I've signed in out of everything. If I were to go back, my Outlook would look into my solution like, well, you haven't signed in for a while. Your refresh token has expired. I'm going to grab a new one. It will actually go and refresh the token behind the scenes for me, and it manages everything for me. That assumes that the solution that you use has a token cache somewhere. Most of the time, MSAL comes with a default cache somewhere. In fact, the .NET solution that I showed you earlier on comes with a number of token caches, whether it's local, in memory, or distributed. It's totally up to you how you want to implement it. But yes, it does. I hope that answers your question. This talks a little bit about B2C again. Whatever code I showed you today actually does exactly the same. So the code I showed you today, if I were to use B2C, I would just point to a different endpoint and have a sign in and sign up policy there. So a different, slightly different endpoint, but it would work in exactly the same way. It uses OpenID Connect to go and acquire tokens. I talked about Microsoft Identity.web. So if Marsha can do it, then Bob should be able to do it too. If I can do it, you guys can do it too. In fact, I would encourage you to use it today. For people asking where that sits, especially for Microsoft Identity.web, it is for .NET Core 3.1 and later. So anything before .NET 3.1 will not be able to use the Microsoft Identity.web. Let's say you have a full .NET app, you have a WPF app that runs on all their framework. Then in that case, you have to use the MSAL library. MSAL is also available for all the other non.NET languages like Java, JavaScript, Python, and what have you. We have previews for Node and Go as well if you are in that space. And finally, you can definitely bring your own libraries. We're not opinionated about that. If you want to use your own libraries because you already have something or you're more accustomed to using other libraries with OpenID Connect, then we totally support you. We have some samples there or examples of other languages. I don't want to go through what was the old one and the new world. It is very, very important as well to know that just because you're using a wrapper with Microsoft Identity.web, which is at the bottom, it doesn't mean that the previous components that you had are not applicable or are not available to you anymore. So if you want to double with cookie authentication, or if you want to do custom events for your JWT bear authentication, then you can definitely use these. These libraries are still available to you. Eric is asking a question. Can you return AD security groups along with the user info so you can define roles in your applications based on AD groups? Yes, you can. When you have groups assigned to a user and they sign in, they will get their groups back. Please note that there's an upper limit of how many groups you can get. I think it's 150. And once that happens, you get a continuation URL that you can use to go and grab. So if a user has 1,000 groups that they belong to, then you can go and grab those IDs with that URL. One thing to note is that you cannot get the Azure AD group names. So you get the IDs, and from that point on, you have to use the graph to go and get that information. So I hope that clarifies things. But yes, group-based authorization is supported with Azure AD, although we do encourage people to use role-based these days, or you can mix and match, whatever works for you. Obviously, if you already have groups, then it makes sense to bring them along rather than try to implement everything. Things have changed quite a bit in the library, so let's go back. There was a lot more code required to implement the authentication in the olden days or older days. It does not mean that all that is gone. As I said, the .NET older applications from 3.1 and before did require a little bit more code, but I think that's totally acceptable. The new library made it a lot easier, so people that are building with 3.1 onwards can benefit from that, especially for ASP.NET. And we simplify the work. However, this is ongoing work, which is great, because what we really, really want to get is your feedback. If you like the format or the new way of doing things in ASP.NET Core and you want to see that in Node or JavaScript or Python, then please do let us know, because the team is looking for that feedback to drive product, right? If everybody says, this is awesome, I mean, it is awesome, right? One line of code and I have everything I need. Then why not make it super easy to do in other languages as well? At this point, let me talk about Graph, because I think we're running out of time as well. Hi, how much time do we have? Is it 1 hour, or do we want to go longer? Do we want to stop at?
It is up to you. No, okay. There's no hard stop. It's up to you.
It's no hard stop. It's up to the people then. Right, Graph. There is only one way to explain Graph when I talk. I mean, there are lots of ways to explain Graph, but I'm always astounded by the way that I get to benefit from Graph. Tweets doesn't end. That's absolutely right, Code with Sean. So Graph is the API to your enterprise data, right? It's only for internal users. People sometimes say, well, I'm using B2C. Where's my Graph? You can't use graph with B2C because it makes no sense. You have no enterprise data for your external users. So as an internal user, I get to benefit from graph every single day. A couple of examples. Every time I try to type an email on Outlook, Outlook is being clever and does a couple of graph queries to find out who are the people I usually interact with, and how can they surface it better. So every time I type an email, the first 3 names that come to my to list are the people in my immediate team. And that is a graph query that goes and pulls the 10 most, the 10 biggest collaborators in my team. So Outlook is being very clever. I can be super efficient by not having to go and look into the global address book to find all these people I need to interact with. And every time I type something, it does clever queries behind the scenes to find information. I can also, directly from Outlook, hover over somebody and find what the organization that they belong in, what their title is, who they report to, who they work with. And I use that all the time because I know I've worked with him before and I know there are other people in his team or her team. How can I find them? It's easy. Just use graph. Same for presence. Last year, Isaac Levin and Scott Huntsman got on stage. There's no stages in the virtual world. What am I saying? They got on stream to talk about managing their lights in the room based on their team's presence. So, I don't know if you saw, but my kids were coming and going. I was like, I'm streaming, I didn't have that. But if I had that solution using graph, I could change my presence to busy and my lights could turn to red. So my kids would know that I am busy. These are all extensible things that you can do with graph. And I love graph for what it brings. One unified API to manage all your data, all your APIs, because it sits on top of your information. And you can build fantastic dashboards. You can build conversations. Me and JP that do the stream actually have a project ongoing that we're trying to create our own IRC client for Teams. So rather than using Teams, we can use our own IRC channel to quickly type things and be more efficient. We're going to be using graph for that. And once you know that authentication and access to the data is all solved for you by a graph and Azure AD, and then the sky becomes the limit when it comes to using organizational data. And we have a lot of people building fantastic solutions. So let me quickly switch into Graph Explorer, which is the best way to get started with graph. If you haven't used graph before, then that's the recommended way. In fact, I was trying to build an automation tool for provisioning app registrations for users. And the way I did it is by going to ak.ms, Graph Explorer, and playing around with application registrations. Let's see if it will sign me in. You can actually use this. I need to zoom in so it's not particularly blurry. Okay, that's slightly better. Graph Explorer has a lot of sample queries for you for most of the things that you need to use, or most of the popular things you need to use. If you want to find all the other ones, there is a Graph API reference doc, so you can open, has all the information. But we'll start with my profile. So a very simple query, just graph.microsoft.com, version 1.0, which is the GA version, and then me. And then at the back of me, you can see I am Megan Bowen today. Sorry, you can't see that. It's not particularly legible. Let's try to make it bigger so I can prove that I'm Megan Bowen down here. And it has some information about me. There's a beta endpoint that has all the experimental things that you might want to play with before they make it into GA. So our beta endpoint is going to be an evergreen beta endpoint where we try new things, and every time we find something super useful, we bring it back into the GA. And we have SDKs for both the GA and the beta if you want to be adventurous with your code. Now you'll notice that the beta has returned probably more data, is it? Yeah, it just scrolls weirdly here because of the zoom in. But you'll notice that there are a lot more lines of JSON here at the back of that, which is great. And what I love about this, and not many people have seen, is the fact that you can actually get all the code you need to implement it in C# or JavaScript or Java. So you download your SDK, and then you're like, how do I implement this query? C#, and then you go Objective-C. I don't know why Objective-C was a choice, but it became a default choice here. So you can choose between all these languages. So I can do a query that says select, and I think it's equals name, company name. Look at that. It even provides you intelligence. Bring it on. So down here, if I go to my response, it just brought the company name because I don't have a company name. But in my code snippet, it even shows me how to filter the data in code. I love it. So if you haven't used Graphquery before, you can come and play here. In fact, you can get your access token to your access token. I need to sign in. I'm not signed in, so it's anonymous data. I'm not going to sign into my Microsoft tenant. We could sign into another account. Let's try another account. Do not use my tokens. Oh, God, I need to find my password now. Remember how I talked about on Microsoft password managers? There you go. Let me grab my password. Let me find my pop-up. Let me do that. Now it's going to prompt me for two-factor authentication on my test account. And I will explain what that means. 195080. Let's verify. And with that, I should be signed in. There you have it. I can actually get my access tokens. Now, if I wanted to go into Postman, in fact, we have a graph extension for Postman, but if I wanted to go into Postman, I could go into Postman and have fun and run my queries there. So Graph Explorer becomes your playground when it comes to implementing solutions with Graph. And then down here, you can grab the code snippets. So as I said, I was playing with that when I was trying to automate app registrations. So I have a solution now that creates an API app registration, adds all the permissions it needs, gets that object, and then creates a client for that API, a client app registration with all the appropriate permissions. I do admin consent via the endpoint, and lo and behold, I have all that end-to-end provision for me via code. So this is what Graph Explorer can do for you. You can create some fantastic immersive experiences for your users. And yeah, I know it uses your data, but you don't have to. And it has like its own flavor of OData. Tapco Wild is saying on the stream that, yeah, it's not perfect, but you know, it's much better than not having any filtering and not having all the capabilities that you get from OData. By the way, not all data capabilities are implemented for Graph. So if you have any feedback, please do let us know, and I will let the Graph team know as well. In fact, they do come on the stream at least once a month now, and you have the opportunity to speak directly to them if you have any feedback whatsoever. And with that, I think I'm finished with like 3 minutes over the hour. So here, last thing I want to say is if you enjoyed this one, and obviously you want to see a higher definition of me doing demos, then join the 4 to 5 show. Because we do stream every Tuesday and Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific. And we let people discover what you can do with Microsoft Identity. Thank you for attending. Let me know if you have any questions. And I appreciate your time today listening to me and looking at the demos.
Awesome. So sure enough, does anyone have any other questions?
I doubt I covered everything.
I will say the cool part about the 425 show is that you know, they regularly have guests to come on and talk about specific things within identity, or how to use something and use identity to use it. Right?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, as much as we like to showcase things on the stream, we find it extremely useful to have people from the field coming to talk to developers and our audience about the things that they build in real life and real world, and we learn from them, and you know, everybody benefits. So if you have built stuff with Microsoft Identity, or if you have an interesting project that you are working on, then you can always reach out to us and come on the stream.
So Christos, do you see Tandy's message? I'm curious what your thoughts about that. So much less ceremony than Identity Server.
Yes, yes, and yes, yes, true. But Identity Server did also have some capabilities that were not automatically or out of the box provided for Azure AD. So there are pros and cons with every platform. The biggest benefit here, obviously, is that with Azure AD and B2C, you don't have to maintain the infrastructure. You don't have to worry about your users' data. You don't have to worry about where is my Identity Server running, how reliable it is, and having to worry about all that and taking care of it's very important. We had people that said, you know what, but Identity Server can do X and Azure AD can't, and that's true. But if you find limitations, then we're always open to that feedback because we're looking to improve the platform and make it work for developers. It's important to ensure that that's the case. But yeah, every tool comes with pros and cons, and we're always evolving.
Awesome. So anyone else have any other questions? Oh, here we go.
Is guest registration possible for an organization that uses Azure AD? Yes. In fact, if I go back to my one of the slides over here, I didn't really cover external identities as part of this, but you can actually bring social media accounts into your organization as guests. It's called external identities. And don't know if you've noticed, but there is a bit of an overlap. If you go to the docs these days, you see B2C and external identities interchangeable in some of the docs. Costing for B2C now has moved into external identities, which makes it a bit weird. But yes, to answer your question, you can bring external identities to your org and add them to your tenant. So have a check out the external identities. In fact, I might be able to find the link now. We have a whole team that is working on that. And I will add the link here. Is there a self-contained test container that can be used in closed environments, or is the only way to have development user orgs is to create a dev Azure account? Let me see if I can unfold this one. Are you talking about an Azure AD test tenant where you can test separately in development to production? Is that the question, Robert? If that's the question, then no. We encourage people to actually have different tenants if they want to do testing, especially considering that some of the test accounts may have some larger or more privileged access. So you don't want to be using those test accounts in production and then accessing resources with those test accounts for testing purposes, especially if you're doing integration. There are challenges, as we know, especially syncing users between the tenants and syncing policies and conditional access and what have you. If you are really interested, please reach out to me. We are in the process of actually thinking about the development experience for around Azure AD. So if you want to get in touch with me, I have put my contact details further up in the chat. Send an email to the 45show@microsoft.com. We can get you in touch with the right people. And as we add or roll out previews of the new capabilities, you can be part of that. But we are very aware of the pain that developers have to go through for testing in development. Let me see if there's anything else in the Twitch stream.
There's a question about Okta.
I minimized at the right time, I think. I'm just kidding. What is the question? Is Okta considered an external identity, or is there more integration with them? And yeah, you can actually, you can go either way. You can use Okta as your external provider to Azure AD, or you can use Azure AD as an external provider to Okta. They enable that because obviously for compete and for, maybe somebody already has massive investment in Azure AD and they want to come to Okta, or the other way around. But we also have teams that help with migration. So if you have a requirement, like your company says, well, we don't want to be paying for two products and it makes sense, then we have teams that can help you. But yeah, Okta supports OpenID Connect. So everything that is OpenID Connect is fair game. Bring it on. God, I can't believe my resolution is so awful. You know what? I think I've got something wrong in my OBS. I can't explain it otherwise.
Yeah, and on top of it, Twitch is even getting it worse because Zoom is converting to 720.
Right, I see.
So, and that's something I can't control. That Zoom does that.
I get it. One way to do it is via OBS. So you can have your guest speakers maybe come via OBS Ninja, and you can point them directly into your stream. But then again, it opens a whole can of worms there. So I'm not saying how you should do it.
Well, we do this because we also have the social part afterwards.
Yes, true.
And
Yeah,
Zoom
OBS
does
Ninja.
make it easy because I literally put in my stream ID and bam, it streams it to Twitch. So it is nice about that.
Fantastic. I didn't know that. Zoom.
It's kind of a hidden feature, and on top of it, the Twitch one, it doesn't actually show up right away. You actually have to do the custom, like YouTube and something else is there by default, but the Twitch is custom, but it's just RMTP, so it's all the same protocol.
Cool. Love it. Thank you for having me again. It was a pleasure doing this session.
All right, so sure enough, everyone on Twitch, we're gonna end the Twitch stream. Thank you for coming out. I should be streaming tomorrow night. Last night I wasn't able to stream because my internet was in and out, and I just was not going to deal with that and try to stream at the same time. But today it's been good, so I think whatever was going on is done. So I will be back on tomorrow night at 8 p.m. All right, everyone, Twitch. See you later.